eventually somebody is gonna
have like some issue.
I know. That's all too.
Brains.
At one point I asked Mason and he's like, I don't remember this.
yeah.
I've
Okay.
been doing all the other stuff.
It's a great vehicle.
Yeah, I got mine.
But yeah, things like oranges, orange juice, most fruit.
Hours a week?
Meat needs to be cooked, but that's for other reasons.
Good. Busy.
Raw beef does taste pretty good.
I have heard a funeral. I have not. I personally do not
Yeah,
enjoy the taste of raw meat.
it was a good funeral. It was a good celebration.
I've heard people say.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Wonderful lady. Last few years kind of sliding into her retirement.
I think
She's
it's
so it's like
so what I've noticed with
really smart.
I'm
People
brilliant
don't
woman.
eat
A lot of
She had a. She was an attorney.
trying to get
Worked in the
like deficient
Yeah, that's
in the
right.
nutrients you get from meat.
U.S. government
Negative
counties,
15
so
over
they
14
kind of worked up in the
over.
higher ranks of
Negative
that.
$1.
Paid all military
Rare meats.
paychecks. Paid the president's
To
paychecks.
maximize,
Same kind
you know,
of
the
thing.
micronutrient.
Really smart woman. Yeah.
But
no one knows.
how to do it, so I-
What does she do?
I think like
Oh yeah, I get it, and I get to the problem and I'm like, wait a minute.
All the
rare
industries that she
favorite.
kind of
Maybe.
supported. Very quiet.
It's amazing how fast math
Interesting.
leaves your
But,
head.
like,
once
I
you
know,
haven't
like,
done
in
it
meat
for-
This is consoling.
I used to prepare like medium rare.
Well, her, so she
Get
goes
to
on
that
her,
place.
You know, as I
so,
studied more.
and her husband.
I need to do like
Around,
additional
It
supplementation
also
to
just
this
depends
stuff
on the
because I
Yeah.
really want him to get it.
Some
Like,
cuts,
you can-
some cuts are
And
best
she is
well
get it,
done.
but it
Some
takes him a
cuts are
while to
best
do it.
Small rare.
Which
Yeah.
is fine.
like
But he doesn't show his
Okay,
work.
like filet mignon.
He does it on a calculator
Yeah,
and then puts the answer down.
That is a cut that is
Oh, yes, like,
The regular celebration.
yeah.
And then some of them, he's like, when do we need to show my work? I don't
It's meant to be able to render.
Because you have to show your work.
Like the general rule of thumb that I always do is like, okay, if somebody is looking through my work, I want them to at least like know what direction I went.
Got my tax.
So like for this, you can look at this and be like, okay, yeah, he divided that over. For this one, you can see, oh yeah, he multiplied this in and then simplified it and then multiplied this in on this side. Okay,
yeah.
like you can kind of follow what's going on.
Yeah.
I think.
Free rentals and all.
Is that I didn't realize
Yeah.
that was
That was,
Yeah.
I forgot about it. But I also
Today I was kind of disappointed. I was kind of wanting to get
yeah, I
to a
think
place
it's
Dad's off
today.
tomorrow, so I told him that.
honestly I've realized so many people I know are into rock
We're doing
climbing.
new systems.
Talk to him about
Yeah.
it.
And I
It's gonna go up.
yeah.
Oh, it's so great.
I have tried it.
What I wanted to get to was
No, I bought it from Elements.
I was gonna be like, I loved it so much that
How do you mean?
But I just did just get to that.
Plug it back into.
It's something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, that's why I drink water after.
Oh,
That might apply to me.
yeah.
It's
I didn't know that I was sick until the doctor told
I
me
don't really
you should
know
stop
the,
drinking so much orange juice or either brush your teeth or wash your mouth out with water.
you know, to be able to.
Why?
It's the same thing with soda.
It was still-
Soda
Represented as
is
the
It was,
binding company.
when I looked it up, it said it can
Yeah,
have water.
That's one of the
actually.
Any
I
answer?
might still get to it,
That's great.
because this, on Wednesday then, we're gonna just talk about
At least it's
sensory
my
systems,
Now,
eyes, your
this isn't
fingers.
quality,
I do
but
like getting,
setting people.
you know those, like Izzy's,
We might try
the
and
little
do
cans,
it.
getting the sparkling apple
Zen,
juice.
because, you know, because you do
Setting
brain
quality.
scans.
It has extra texture to apple
Picture the
juice,
brain
it's good.
So this looks like you're-
I mean, I've definitely heard of sparkling.
We did this in Brazil, right?
It's different
Part of the brain,
like
like,
M&Ms and I looked at the little green
Oh.
second thing on the
something puts all of that together and makes it a cohesive experience.
It's laying the foundation for algebra.
Delicious.
Brain's lighting up, you know.
So they're, so they just figured if they always watered it
Taking all
down.
those pieces of information.
Prove that this.
No, because the Izzy is angry.
Proofs is something like
Six topic I should look into. Yeah, just
Yeah.
60, really good. Not
I
great.
think that's just.
Yeah, well,
It's a
everyone-
triangle.
It's somewhat fun because I walk around like this tree store.
So is that the
And then I'll say,
algebra?
somebody who's like
I'm
set
the
from
first.
So this is post, this is.
It's
I know,
You know,
I know stuff.
Like
you've
the
got
next one.
Dennis who just says, you know,
It's funny, you don't see
consciousness,
this
free
with
will, that's all
guys,
just
but-
illusory. We're just coming out of it.
You just don't, because we know that, you know.
It's
heavily
emergentism.
People don't think about this, you may get it sometimes, but someone's always commenting.
You just start keeping
Like
like
a 7-footer.
packets of
They
salt.
get
Drive
tired
up?
of that too,
Huh?
so
Good
with
drive
Ardell,
up.
yeah.
Good time of day.
He's had people come up.
You're not like
I was just saying, I've never seen anything else I really do. I mean, sweet and salty.
Just go.
Yeah,
He
it's
doesn't
like-
really like
Well, what
that.
happened because
Because so
I was
I
gonna do M&M.
I found that out a while
I'm
ago.
at Target looking for
There
M&Ms.
is, we never think
There's
of
a
the
recipe I make
beauty
is
of
shortbread.
like you're
It'd be an interesting talk, like,
you know,
I don't see
this discussion in our last book.
Hey, how you
Yeah.
doing?
Strangely timed.
So have you ever thought about that the other way, is that someone's real tall, don't even mention.
Yeah.
I generally don't. I tend to just be like.
M&M means I'll never have to worry about sodium.
The most I'll comment on is usually it's like,
I'm not gonna do
Like, I
anything.
could have them if it weren't for that.
This is
from
45.
one tall person to another, I'm like, I'm 6'5".
Yeah, but no,
There
he's
was
7 foot.
phase where really, like, my
Alright, I'm gonna go grab food.
I don't know how much she would salt.
One of my best friends, the first
Part of all those.
she's 4'10", and I was like 6'3". She walks up to me and just goes
Yeah.
Wow,
It's
you're tall.
lactose
Wait, but I'm short. No, that's okay.
So maybe you're not.
Yeah, I'm not allergic to spinach.
And then that was the first interaction we had. There was a like,
Sweeten it with
now we're best friends. So
I'm
sure if I get
a bit,
especially the
Well,
like
yeah,
the I feel so bad for you. It's like
well, that, like, that was just rude, or just.
Yeah.
Yeah, or the
Why would
lactose.
you say push your
Because you're lactose
But you know what
intolerant, so you
Scott
gotta
Hayes
worry.
said?
He's
pro
that's how like.
He's retired on the radio. He said, you know what, you don't see a lot of 65-year-old 7-footers walking.
So I would try.
Hard on your heart,
A2
maybe, or
milk, I
you
think
just.
is what you
Oh,
You tried
okay,
that?
that's- Oh, that was so
I was curious if
Yeah.
that,
A lot
like,
of-
did I eat too much ham?
ridiculously
That's a
tall
different-
individuals. It's like a growth
thing with
hormone
You guys-
and something or another that causes. It's like some underlying something that causes growth.
I have
And when I hit my salt limit, my
So
my
it can cause
my
problems
brain's
when
like,
you
okay.
because
I was actually.
That's how
Yogurt
actually
Is it
not
really
hard?
hard.
No,
They maintain
Bacteria,
7 foot
free
tall.
salt
yogurt.
until you got enough salt. I know for me,
Yeah.
Did you adjust the
because
camera?
I just don't eat a lot of processed foods.
Because
Naturally contain a lot of fat.
To be fair,
Sargento cheese, they
So
they do, is they crave salt back up really, really enzyme in the milk. Stir it,
Alright.
let it sit, salt.
I will go ahead and get us started tonight. We have a few announcements, but we will be getting into a talk about free speech, the Constitution. If you saw Grayson's message, I'm sure is very enlightening. But we have our wonderful David Spiegel here again to talk about it. But without further ado, we have a few announcements. Climbing night this Thursday from 8 to 10 p.m. It is free harnesses, free shoes, free access to the wall. It's already free access to the wall, but you get free shoe rentals, free harnesses, everything like that. And it's just going to be awesome. I'm going to try and make it. I don't think I have a test that night, so we should be good. But yeah, if you haven't ever been to the climbing wall 3 times, I'd give it a shot at least. It's pretty fun. We will be whiteboarding next Friday, not this Friday, next Friday, that is the 20th. That is the weekend before spring break. So we'll be tabling, or no, that is the weekend. I don't know, it's a weekend. We will be tabling on that day. So come join us. Our next Woody's night is on the 30th. That is the week after spring break. So that Monday we are meeting So the week after spring break, feel free to come and join us for a night of talking and also pizza. So join us for that. I heard the last time it was really good. I'm hopefully gonna join this night because I like pizza. We have a group me. If you're not a part of it, please join it. We always send all of our announcements in it. It's really helpful to be in it. We just announce what we're talking about, when we're tabling, etc. So if you want to be in the know, join that group. And we also have a YouTube. We record all of these meetings, so if you miss one and are really sad that you missed it and want to watch it, or if you just want to watch one again, you can do that too. But we post them. We generally post them night of or morning after. So if you don't see it immediately, just give it a day and then it should be up. Yeah, without further ado, I'll pray us in and then we'll go ahead and get started. Lord, thank you for this time that you've given us on campus, that we get to meet together and just talk freely. I pray that you'd let us appreciate that because not everywhere do we get that opportunity. But I just thank you also for the time we spent tabling last Friday, the good conversations we had, and I just pray that you had worked in the hearts of all the people we talked to, and that we can leave a pebble in their shoe to get them thinking and just really tackle some hard questions that most people don't even consider. So I just thank you for that opportunity, and I pray for tonight that we would have ears to hear and hearts to listen, and that we would just learn something tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
You gonna introduce?
This is David Spiegel. I introduced him initially. He's been here before, so
Old
he's
hat,
wonderful.
old hat, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got some handouts for you, so go ahead and pass those around. Okay, and I got a couple others as we go along. All right, we're gonna talk about the First Amendment rights. What's the relation with hate speech, offensive speech, and public accommodation? And if we have time, we'll go into the Jack Phillips case, just some principles with that. Why did the Supreme Court rule the way they ruled? And the Lori Smith versus Elenis case that more directly dealt with the issue of First Amendment rights and public accommodation. And I've heard this before, in the field of law, the medical field and education, this is where Christians are going to experience or be challenged with policies, okay? That are gonna be issues where you've gotta think through, or it's, you know, the term, it's, you're gonna have woke policies or progressive, or there's gonna be things butting up against with your convictions. And so I'm in education. I've been at my place for 28 years, and I have survived without breaking and not even bending that much, but you really have to figure how to maneuver and what am I gonna be doing in a certain situation and what am I gonna not be willing to do. And a little later, I am gonna share something that happened to me. It'll probably give me some credibility here. You know, easy to talk about these difficult things. Have you been through it? Yes, I have. And I had a situation where someone, two supervisors wanted me to be more sensitive with my speech. And so I will talk about that later, what I did and what I learned from it, okay? All right, that's a little teaser, okay? So anyway, what I'm gonna do is just thinking through this. How do I walk through and avoid these secular minds in the minefield, right? I'm gonna share principles and some practical tips that hopefully after today you'll walk away and go, you know, this is good. I'm sitting at the table, I feel a little bit more informed and maybe have a little bit more direction. So I hope it just helps you. It's just me thinking this through. And I've always been interested in free speech, okay? So every time there's an article on free speech I come across over the years, I will read it and I keep getting confirmation from what I read in the news a current event related to these issues, that I'm on the right track with the stuff that I'll be sharing, okay? All right. So let me first ask you this. So I've divided this into 3 sections: First Amendment and hate speech, First Amendment rights and hate speech, First Amendment rights and inclusive sensitivity, First Amendment rights and public accommodation, okay? So I want to ask you guys a question. Is there a hate speech exception to constitutional protections? First, I want someone to explain. That's a tricky sentence, isn't it? Is there a hate speech exception to constitutional protections? Can someone tell me what that means? What does that mean? It's kind of hard. What exactly does that mean? Does anybody, go ahead.
Is it the idea that like the constitutional right of freedom of speech can be suspended if something is considered hate speech?
Yes, it's like there are lots of speech protections, except in the Constitution, hate speech there's an exception. It doesn't get those protections. There's hate speech protections, there's free speech protections, except when it's hate speech. There's an exception to those protections. Hate speech doesn't get those protections. So my question is there a hate speech exception to constitutional protections? In the Constitution.
In the Constitution, I don't think so, but I know you can't use fighting words. Because that is considered a.
Yeah, and we will get there, but I'm just saying in the wording of the Constitution, did our framers go to great lengths to make sure there was a hate speech exception to First Amendment rights? Okay, no. Okay, does anybody, well, I'll tell you what, let me read this and then I want you to ask, why would that have been the case? And don't worry, we will address what you had brought up, okay? So I even have on your notes, maybe page 2, it says, don't worry, okay? So we'll get there. Here's what Robbie George said, and I will pass this out. You can read this some other time. This is a very good little snappy article on what hate speech is and exceptions. So go ahead and take that. But here's what Robbie George said. So you're correct. There is no hate speech exception to constitutional protections. It's not in the wording of the First Amendment or nearby, okay? Robert George, McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and Director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals, an institution at Princeton University. He has consulted a lot, like if a congressional subcommittee has a question, he's always been on a lot of speed dials when they need some clarification or expert advice, right? So here's what he says. Hate speech is a phrase with no settled or determinate meaning. Although certain forms of expression, defamation, obscenity, threats, false advertising, etc., that addresses what you said a little bit, are unprotected under the First Amendment, there is no hate speech exception to the amendment. I regret to say that this is a matter on which even many of our most talented and best educated young people are in error. Many of my own students at Princeton enter my constitutional interpretation course erroneously believing that hate speech is outside the scope of constitutional protection. One of my first tasks is to disabuse them, okay? So you even get it at Princeton Law, people score real high on the GRE or the SAT or the LSAT. They get this wrong, and he says there's no hate speech exception to constitutional protections. So I wanted to, let me make sure you know what that means and then ask you why they purposely had no exception. Okay, that'll be our next question, but let me read this here. The First Amendment provides radical protection for all kinds of speech, including speech that offends others. The Constitution only allows a few exceptions to this protection. Most speech is protected. In other words, the Constitution does not say most speech is protected, but offensive or hate speech is afforded no such protection. Rather, the United States Constitution does not allow offensive speech to be restricted. So already with First Amendment, they don't have exceptions in the wording, okay? It's like a guardrail. You're already seeing a guardrail that you can't crash into. And the courts defend that guardrail. They don't want anything to crash into it, okay? Here's a couple other, and you can find lots of these statements from Supreme Court opinions. If there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that the government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable. And then here's another one, but remember, guardrails, right? You see that they are very vigilant in protecting First Amendment rights. Here's one more. Where the design benefit of a content-based speech restriction is to shield the sensibility of listeners, the general rule is that the right of expression prevails. Okay, now, don't worry, there are hate speech statutes. You have them here at this school. Can you get in trouble if you use racial, sexist epithets and some other things? Can you be expelled? So don't worry, there are these things that you can't do, but it's narrowly defined. It's in a category that's narrow, it isn't broad, but it's there. So to reassure all of us, there's certain things you're not allowed to say, okay? This is talking, there's a reason why they didn't have the wording of hate speech exception in the Constitution, okay? So we'll get to where hate speech is not allowed, but it's narrow, okay? So let me just ask you, here's my second question. Why did the founders provide no exception? Do you think of why? I'll give you a little clue. Think of them being prescient. They're thinking of the future or what could happen if they had something in there, an exception to those protections. But how come they didn't do this?
I think they foresaw that those exceptions could be abused.
How so? Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
You could change or like kind of mess with the definition of hate speech. There's like with all of the other exceptions, there's a very clear definition. But with hate speech, it's kind of like up to the opinion of different people whether it's hate
Okay,
speech
that's
or not.
good. Go ahead.
Dovetailing that, it's the core of it is interpretation, which is subjective, not objective. You can't objectify the definition of that. Now you can have a pretty broad understanding of that, but even still, there's English I think is really a language that this is hard to deal with because we're so good at having so many words for one thing, and interpretation is still a major part of that. And so hate speech could be defined as literally saying almost anything.
Okay.
Because if it's interpreted as hate speech, then it could be argued as hate speech.
So go ahead.
Do you know when the term hate speech was first used? It feels like it was 19 something.
Yes, I agree with you. More recent, I don't know if we saw this terminology in the 1800s. Yeah. But when you said it could be interpreted any way you want, hate speech could become subjective and it could be weaponized. If there was a hate speech exception, then if you disagree with something and there was that exception, if you could pull it off and say that's hate speech, you could get that speech restricted, it's not protected. And so I think our founders knew that since free speech rights codified in the law guarantee it, the reason you've got to make free speech rights a law is because a lot of people don't want you to have free speech throughout history. You could say something that's disagreeable, offensive, deeply offensive, irritating. So the reason we have it in law is that even if you're irritated or offended, you can't restrict that speech. But if there was a hate speech exception, then you have an avenue there. You could call like people who voted for Biden. I don't like what they're saying, that's hate speech. People that voted for Trump, that's hate speech. It could be weaponized. And so that's why they didn't have it in there, yeah.
No, I think there's kind of a general understanding that the best way to combat bad speech or objectionable speech is with good speech.
Yes, robust counter argument, right?
Yeah.
So here's an example when Trump's running for president, this was on the news, first it was against Hillary, then later against Biden. What kind of signs would you see outside of a Trump rally that protesters were holding? It said, stop the hate. You'd see these posters saying, stop the hate. I was watching it was Dr. Phil, okay? It didn't mean I was unemployed and I was these shows at 4 p.m. Why am I watching Dr. Phil? But he was going into some contemporary controversies, and one was about gender and the trans debate. And someone said something to someone advocating some position related to trans issues. And this person brought up something, and the person responded and said, stop the hate. Now, if there was a hate speech exception, then you could start calling people who disagree with you it's hate, and maybe it'll be restricted. Political party, you didn't vote for that candidate. Can you call their platform and their policies or what they're advocating hate? Our founders knew that would happen, it would be weaponized, okay? So let me ask you this first of all. So here's a practical tip, okay? How do you respond if, let's say you're reasoning with someone, you give them an argument, you make a good point, and if someone says to you, stop the hate, if you're not ready for that, it can kind of catch you off guard, right? That's the purpose of that. Does anybody here, how would you respond to that? Like if someone said it to me, I'm not going to be caught off guard at all. I know how I'm going to respond to it. But if someone did that, it's designed to knock you out of your saddle a little bit. So it's really good to kind of think this through. Anybody have an idea? If someone just is in your face and says, stop the hate, how do you respond to that?
I don't hate anybody.
Okay, you don't hate anybody?
I would ask myself, have I said something that was taken the wrong way? Because that wasn't my intention. Like, I don't hate
Okay.
anyone, but if
So
someone...
you're just clarifying, have you been rude? Okay, let's assume you haven't been rude at all and you know you haven't been rude.
I don't know if it's the best approach, but historically, what I've done in related situations is say like, what I'm saying is 100% true. Like, because usually, if I'm engaging in a debate or discussion in a public space, I try to stick to the facts.
Okay. But you've stuck to the facts and you're getting that response. Anybody else? Yeah.
Ask them why it's hateful.
Okay.
Just that makes them think through the argument more than just using it as a catch-all.
Okay. Those are good, and you just want to, you're trying to clarify and make sure everything. Here's I deal with it nicely. I'll say, you know what? When I hear that phrase from someone after I've given a good reason or a line of reasoning, and I get that as a response, I'll say, it sounds like you don't have any arguments at all, or you don't know how to respond to what I'm saying. I said, just so you know, that's how I interpret. I've heard the phrase before, but when I hear it, it's telling me you don't have arguments for your side that you're aware of and have grappled with some of these other issues. Just because I'm disagreeing with you doesn't mean there's hate. It just means I disagree. Okay, so hopefully that could help, but you know, that can be effective in a nice way. Say, I interpret that you're not responding back with arguments. Because I don't hate you, I'm just disagreeing. People have disagreed all through history, it doesn't mean we hate each other. It means we disagree, so maybe file that away and that can be helpful, okay? So here's your first principle. You cannot shut down someone's speech just because you are offended. Deeply offended. There is offense of sensibilities, okay? When something happens where it's irritating or offensive, unless it's in this narrow category of illegal hate speech, which we'll get to, okay? If it's out that, a lot of things can be offensive that's not in that narrow category. Trump or Hillary could offend you, right? Here's what you do. You either ignore, like let's say you overhear something, ignore them. You can do this, ignore them and roll your eyes. Or you could respond with robust counter-argument, right? And that's where you came in, Carl, you said respond with good philosophy, okay?
Yeah.
But unless there's these other things, defamation, battery, assault, you're so intimidating, you are stifling even the opportunity or for people to even talk. These things you can't do, you can't yell fire in a crowded thing, stuff like that. One thing you can't do, ignore, roll your eyes, respond with robust counter-argument. One thing you can never entertain, if you just offend it because you don't like their ideas, is ever try to restrict that speech. It's not an option, okay? So, let me give you a definition here of what hate speech is. So, okay, we're finally getting to this narrow category, okay? So here's how the law defends hate speech, okay? Existing hate speech statutes refer only to those expression of racial, national, or religious animosity in which the communication is proven to be the direct cause of violence, discrimination, or likely to provoke violence and discrimination. The constitutional focus on speech that expresses political, moral, and conscious viewpoints that others find offensive does not fall under the purview of this narrowed definition. Many in contemporary society define hate speech far too broadly, okay? So do you guys all see when I said don't worry? There are some things you cannot say. And especially if there's animosity, racial, or animosity toward groups where someone could say, I was there, and what you said, I know it incited 5 people over here. They went out and beat someone up in that community of color, for example. That's the kind of stuff that's illegal. You have it in your student handbook, stuff like that. You can't do it. However, there are other stuff outside that it can be offensive. You just have to, in a pluralistic culture, get some thick skin, deal with views you're not going to agree with that could irritate you. You just can't stifle that speech. So imagine this box of narrowly defined of illegal hate speech. And all of us, if we have tact and kindness, we would not want to communicate with those words anyway. But you could be very nice and articulate views, especially from a Christian perspective, that are just going to be offend people anyway, right? But those outside that square of narrow definition, it can't be restricted, okay? A lot of students in my class, I will go over civility with them, and when I'm done with stuff, it includes a lot of this. I said, how many of you here that have just gotten out of high school, how many of you know that if you're offended by what someone says, you can't restrict their speech? And yes, I've had several students, I'd say most of them from high schools that have never heard this. Which they should have, right? And that could be a whole nother discussion. How come they aren't told that? That's why you have a lot of people, if they are offended, they think someone shouldn't have the right to say that. But you have to protect that so people can express their disagreements. Because when you don't allow that, you're living under a government that you're probably not too happy, right? Okay, now I told you I was gonna share something that happened to me. Just in case all of you are going, oh, it's real easy to talk about all this bravado. You know, have you been through the fire, Dave? I actually have, okay? I've worked at 5 different colleges, so don't try to guess what college this was, okay? I don't wanna bring up names. I had debates in my ethics class, and on the controversies of the day, one student went to a business that was controversial and brought back an artifact, and the artifact, this business actually mimicked something I did in class. This student took a picture, and it really had nothing to do with the controversy that particular business was involved in. It just came from that business. So I got this thing, he goes, I just wanted to tell you what I bought here, Dave, and doing my research, I thought you'd get a kick out of it. That it was pretty amazing, the artistry. And I was the focal point, okay? So I was showing it to someone, a colleague. I said, Savannah, check this out. And I go, this is from that business, the one that's been in the news for a long time. And it's a 2-man office. So someone was there, it was a large 2-man office. And she said, I can't believe that this artifact or that was even brought, or this is being dignified. And I very deftly, wasn't gonna get in a little argument right there on my way out, but I knew what was going on, right? I said, well, that's the beauty of the United States. We have free speech and we can give our opinions. And actually in my class, and I named the specific issue, I'd say about 65% of my students lean that way, more conservative, as opposed to the other way. But you know, isn't that the beauty of conversation? And I just left, okay? So anyway, 2 days later, I open up my email. Hi, Dave, it's one of my deans. Do you have 30 minutes to talk? And I go, sure. You know, when your dean wants to talk, you want to like clear your schedule because you don't want to be guessing what it is. So he goes, I'll walk you over. So he's walking me over to his office. My chair's with me, okay? And as we're walking over, I can tell someone was a little miffed, okay? So I said, oh, maybe this is gonna be good. And I kind of had a hunch, just a subtle one. So I get in there. Did you show this so-and-so to so-and-so? I go, yeah. He goes, can you see how this is insensitive, that this could offend people? I said, possibly, but this is so, and then there were details about where it came from. I said, this is so indirect. It did come from that place. It wasn't even close to what the controversy was, but yeah, so I showed it. What's the problem? So anyway, now I got to be honest here. In the beginning, I was blindsided and I was stammering a little bit because I got nervous. But then I have a big mouth and I'm pretty good with my mouth. Once I warmed up, it was a thing of beauty. You guys would have been very proud of me. So I just kind of gave a little primer. I go, my gosh, this is a college campus and academic freedom. We are supposed to share ideas, and a citizen in a pluralistic culture has to get thick skin and deal with different views in the room. I just think this is scandalous, you're asking. So he said, are you gonna be more sensitive? Now, I knew who the person was, they filed an anonymous complaint with HR. I knew who it was. Can you guys take a guess who it was? Who do you think it was? It was that other person in the office, right? So I kept saying that person's name on purpose because it's supposed to be anonymous. It ticked him off a little bit. I kind of enjoyed it. I'll just confess that. And he said, "Are you going to be more sensitive?" And I said, "No." I said, "That person needs to grow up, act like an adult, and get some thick skin." Back and forth. And again, "Are you going to be more sensitive, Dave?" I said, "No. That person needs to grow up, get some thick skin, and act like an adult in a pluralistic culture." They asked me a third time, "You gonna be more sensitive?" "No, that person needs to." Okay, same thing. And then eventually I said, "You know what, fellas, I just think we're looping here, and I don't know how we can end this." And you can go, Dave. They were a little exasperated. You can go. And now, I didn't know if I was gonna get fired or not. However, we have so much due process. I didn't think that was likely for something like this, but I still didn't know, right? But I walked out of that office knowing I didn't sell my soul. And so here's something you guys need to think about. And then I'm going to tell you, if that ever happens to me again, I have a tip for you. Just file it away. It may come in handy. But here's the thing. So let's go to practical tip A3. Think beforehand how you're going to act in a situation like this. How you will resolve to act. Don't be blindsided. Think prior, because I'm telling you, if you sell your soul, especially as a Christian, we want to stand up for God. Don't you all want to be bold if those situations ever come? And we even think if we had to be martyred, God, I just don't want to deny you. Martyrs have always amazed and impressed me for Jesus, right? That level of conviction. I know we all want that. If you sell your soul, I'm telling you, it's going to haunt you. You're going to have regret. You're going to walk down and just shake your head and go, "Why did I do that?" The redemption will come if it ever happens again and you took a stand. But I'm telling you, you'll regret it. I walked out of there and I didn't sell my soul, and I felt pretty good about that. And here's the thing. If you got fired for something like that, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Eventually, through the courts, you're going to get your job back. And that institution could even get fined, okay? But unless something negative happens, you can't have legal recourse from these Christian legal or free, American freedom institutes. They don't necessarily have to be religious, like, fire, just free speech. You will get their services if you've been terminated. But if no negative action has happened, they have a budget that's not unlimited at all. They will probably not take your case. But I'm saying, stand if you know this is correct. And if something happened to you, the consolation is you're probably going to get your job back. I don't know how far you'll have to go through the courts, but most likely that will happen, okay? Now, here's the tip. Here's what I wished I would have done. I did okay, Here's what you do. If this ever happens to any of you, do this. Say, and they want you to be more sensitive with your speech or violating your conscience. First Amendment guardrails here, right? Just say this. You know what? I want to be a good employee, and I want to be thoughtful here. And you're just throwing a lot at me. Can we do this? Could you please send me an email specifically delineating where you want my speech to go and where it would not go? And I would like, there were two people in there, we'll just call them Seymour and Harry. I'd like Dean Harry and Chair Seymour, if you both could be on that email, but let's meet tomorrow. I would just like to I'm still a little foggy and I need to think about this because I want to be a thoughtful employee. And let's meet tomorrow, but I'd like to stop this right now. But reiterate, let's meet tomorrow. Could you please send me an email so I know what you're asking me to do? Now, you guys, Are they ever gonna send you that email? But you know what? I actually, if I could have done this over, so file that away. It's not a bad, because if they are wondering, is this really constitutional? They're not gonna send that email. Now, if the dean goes, I will, that dean's gonna get fired because the president's gonna go, boy, you are not very intelligent about the law. They're just not gonna send it. And you indirectly send them a message and you could stop it right there and go, we can come back tomorrow, but I really need that email just to kind of be thoughtful. I wanna be a good employee. That's what I would do differently. So if you think that's helpful, that can apply in a lot of different situations. If you feel something's going on that you disagree with, what it does, it gets the Constitution in the room. The Constitution is very, very far away, okay? So there you go with that, okay? So these are just some things, like, I remember when I was in that meeting, I even told them, I said, sure, that person, I kept saying the person's name, I said, they never should have thought because they were offended they could stop my speech. You roll your eyes, you ignore, you respond with robust counter argument. And it just shows you where people think okay? So, all right, let's go to the next one. First Amendment rights and inclusive sensitivity, okay? What is the opposite of being offensive? You're offensive, now we want to be what?
Defensive?
No, offensive speech.
Okay.
She's still got the Super Bowl on her mind. The opposite of being offensive in speech is being what in our speech? Honest, tolerant,
Gracious.
sensitive. Okay, since that term is used a lot, all right? And so realize that if free speech protects a lot of speech, and a lot of that to others is going to be disagreeable, irritating, or even deeply offensive. It offends my sensibility. It's protected. The opposite of that is, inclusive sensitivity, okay? So realize that there's already some opposition, okay? There's a collision course that's going to happen, okay? Our culture, there's a prevalent modern philosophy called expressive individualism that requires sensitivity. So what I'm saying here is a lot of people have a personal philosophy that's called expressive individualism nowadays, that you cannot express yourself when there's judgment in the room. Okay, so expressive individualism, if you talk to a lot of people in modern society on college campuses, you'll see this expressed. Now, I've got a great book here. A lot of people have talked about it, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Have anybody read that? Carl, you read it? When you have time, I recommend you read this, because as Christians, you want to share the gospel. I haven't read a better book that would help me understand where people are coming from than this. And great philosophy, and it starts from Rousseau and goes all the way up to today, to inclusive sensitivity and sensitivity training. So when you're out of school, I'm not so lame-brained to say, you guys should read this now when you're in STEM. And I always hated people saying, you should read this book. And I'm going, do you know I'm in college and my undergrad is in geology, that's a hard science, and I'm busy. When you have time, I'm telling you, it'll help you. Carl, you're nodding your head.
It's very thick reading, is the way I would describe it. Especially for people from a STEM background.
That could be true.
Because he goes into, he traces a lot of different lines.
He does.
Literature and psychology and different social movements.
All coalescing to where we are today. We have individuals, look, and so when I'm reading this, think about this, boy, this requires sensitivity. Hence the push for inclusion, sensitivity, inclusive, sensitive environments. It's coming from this prior philosophy and this prevalent philosophy right now. Here is, okay, let me give you some tenets of it. The belief that each person has a unique inner core of feelings, desires, or psychological identity, and that living authentically, and the only chance or requirement for happiness, you have to express your inner self outwardly. You have to be authentic, be yourself. Identity is internal and psychological. The purpose of life is self-expression. External authorities, tradition, religion, family, biology, human anatomy, that's what they're talking about there, social norms should not restrict that expression, okay? So to be happy, you have to be your authentic self, express and identify who you are. And you can't do that if there are opposing views, in a sense, in the room. So be sensitive. Different views indirectly send judgment. Do you guys see? So if this is where people are, and you want to get rid of these traditions, religion, norm, who are they thinking about mostly in the United States? Christianity in the main. There's judgment. Just by you walking around and go, there's a follower of Jesus and I know what they think Jesus taught. Okay? Do you see how that's antithetical, right? So if you're wondering, where did this inclusion and sensitivity, you have diversity, legitimate stuff, equity is legitimate, so is inclusion to a certain extent, right? We want everybody to have a voice, to be tolerant, respectful. Everybody feel that they're acknowledged. Very legit. This goes beyond that. We need a level of sensitivity. If it's not there, there's some judgment. Even if it's unspoken, there's economic oppression. We understood that with Karl Marx, the proletariat being oppressed. Now there's oppression of the psychological variety, okay? And that's because all you have to do is be an Abrahamic who's committed to God, right? And there's judgment. It's like the aroma of Christ, it's part of it, okay? And the last point, society is expected to affirm and recognize the identity someone expresses, okay? I have a poster that I go over expressive individualism in my class. And it was the LGBTQ club was having an event. So they had these posters around and it said, come join us as we work toward all of us being our authentic selves. And people want to be their authentic selves, and you're getting a lot of people, I'm just tired of opposition to that. Specifically Christians, right? So the opposite of offense is inclusive sensitivity, and there's also something else going on with this push here is, so there's some animosity toward Christianity, right, because of this, and when Christian concerns are taken seriously in a legal process, this can bother people too, because when there's legal consideration, it attaches a reasonableness to their views that it deserves to go through the court and get a fair hearing. When we're at a point in our culture, a lot of people want this kind of press for Christianity. It's backwards, it's intolerant, and it's unreasonable, right? So if we have that going on and we have expressive individualism, this is why we have this push. Golly gosh darn, in the workplace and in schools, we are going to have an inclusive environment that's sensitive, that starts going to speech, right? So you see in your notes there, it says collision course. You have First Amendment rights are on a collision course because they protect even offense with inclusive sensibility. So I've got a little diagram here. Okay. And you guys, look, it's gonna be obvious when you see this. I am gifted in adult stick figure art, okay? Look, you guys, I was telling Carl and Don, don't be jealous of me. All you can do is appreciate the talents of other people. You've got your own talents. Okay, don't be envious here. All right. So here's the collision course, but this is gonna at least help you get your bearings a little bit. So we have this wall in the beginning. On the one side, there are constitutional First Amendment rights that protect freedom of speech that often can be disagreeable, irritating, even offensive to others, okay? That is headed toward a collision with an inclusive environment requires sensitivity in speech, etc., so as not to offend others, but rather let all be their authentic selves without judgment in the room. Do you see that? An expressive individual is feeding that. And other reasons people are just getting, they want Christianity in the background, at least those that take it seriously, okay? So you see how they're doing this. So if you go down to the conditions, so you have a lot of people in corporations and in schools, we want an inclusive environment, okay? And it requires these conditions. So you could have a corporation or a school going, here are conditions for an inclusion, an inclusive environment. The Constitution is the guardrails around that. You can have legitimate conditions for inclusion, and the First Amendment rights tell you how far they can go and how far they can't go. They can't crash into those guardrails, okay? But here's what happens. If you have a meeting in a school or you have a corporate meeting, you have a lot of well-meaning people, right? And they want this and they want to talk about speech and pronouns and well-meaning. And the Constitution is far, far away, right? You know when the Constitution gets near? When you're in court, right? Can you see how you could start having some inclusion policies that actually have crashed through those guardrails and they're not even aware and they're well-meaning, okay? So you have to keep that in mind, and this is where when they start crashing in the guardrails, this is where you get people objecting and it ends up in court, right? Now, the good news is conservatives are winning in the courts because the Constitution is there. And as long as you have a judge that understands, regardless, there's no viewpoint discrimination, and just understands the law, here's what a good judge is going to do to a school or a corporation. And there are cases that have demonstrated this. The conditions you are requiring for your vision of inclusion, they're asking too much and you have to back off them a little bit, okay? Like I said, it could be well-meaning people. That's what a good judge will do, is you need to back off those. And remember, First Amendment protections, so far, the courts, Supreme Court, and lots of other courts, they are not to be messed with, okay? They're guardrails that still are holding up. But hopefully that kind of helps you see what's going on. And the reasons conservatives will win in the courts is these conditions for inclusion are crashing through those First Amendment guardrails. You can have an inclusive environment that's sensitive, as long as you don't go too far with it. But people, you know, they're clueless about the constitutional ramifications. So, I've got a couple practical tips here. If you pay attention to the news and read articles, you'll have a representative from the school say this. But all we're doing is following the inclusion policies laid down by our system, right? Or by headquarters. So they're kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, but they will often, if you start paying attention, they're going to appeal to an existing policy, and all we're doing at our elementary school is following that through. But here's the question you have to ask. Okay, there is an inclusion policy, but let me ask you this. An inclusion policy could have lawful conditions to create an inclusive environment, but also could include unlawful. So you just have to say, okay, I understand that, but what's happening here is it seems like this inclusion policy, the system is laid down, is asking too much and has unlawful conditions, and I guess that's what we're saying. So even though they will appeal to an inclusion policy, it can be lawful or it could be unlawful. And so you want to just ask, is this inclusion policy requiring too much? So if we go back here, conservatives, when they're asking too much, they've gone to court and they're winning in the courts. A judge says you can't do that, okay? So if you ever have this kick the can, or that's what an elementary principal is gonna say, right? We have an inclusion policy, we need to look at that, that's what the issue is. It's unlawful, you're asking too much, the Constitution's far away, but you go to court and a good judge, or sometimes you just have to go through the appeals process. Eventually, because it's First Amendment, schools will have to change their policies. You see it all the time with cases, okay? But that has kind of helped me be prepared for that. But anytime there's free speech articles in whatever news app you read, I'd recommend reading them and start seeing these principles being confirmed. And you'll see a lot of people who they're getting sued by a parent. They will say, we're just following the policies laid down of inclusion. So it sounds great. Why would you want to be against that? We're not against that. We're against when they're asking just too much. You can back off, protect First Amendment rights, and still have a really good, fair to everybody inclusion policy. I have a good example at CCA. My college here, we were starting to get email signatures. You know what an email signature is? Everybody's putting their picture on it, and then they're putting this. They were starting to get wackadoodle, like a mile long. And we had to, can you guys relate, right? So we had our VP of Academic Affairs, they had meetings, and they said, okay, we're reining this in. These are the styles for the email signatures, okay? And it was a good policy. They had some pronouns, some without pronouns. But do you see what was good about that? Is that it's an inclusive environment. They respected everybody and gave everybody an opt-out at the same time. If they had had an email signature, here's where you have to put your pronouns. And you have to. That would have been a bad policy. But here was a VP of Academic Affairs. He had 4 different styles, 2 without pronouns, 2 with. And I looked at that as a believer and I said, okay, very good. Okay, that is a good policy there, where it respects, some people don't want to, they have a right, and some people are okay with that. And that solution is you give people the ability to participate or opt out. It's when there is no opt out of some kind and the guardrails are getting crashed into, they end up in court with a parent who gets off the couch and does something about it, right? Yeah.
In that example, just trying to think through, at a high level, in that example, could you ever argue that they're just restricting your speech by telling you what you could put in the signature line? Would that ever fly in court?
Oh, you mean the style?
Right. I'm just trying to understand how far the Constitution goes, how persnickety you can be, right?
You know what, you could, and I would say to that person, maybe there are better mountains to die on. If they're getting wackadoodle, and I might say, you have a lot of time on your hand. You must be roasting chestnuts over the fire. technically, let me know if you know someone that ever goes to court on that, let me know how it turns out. I suppose so, but just with the signatures, I was okay with getting them reined in a little bit. I was impressed that you want pronouns, fine, but if you don't, that is okay too. That's what I look for in a secular institution, right? And I've been meaning to bump into this person and say, you know, I just want to let you know that I was impressed by that. I think you understand the Constitution and you're maneuvering in pluralism, and that was intelligent, right? Sometimes that's not the case, right? There have been institutions, they've been requiring certain things, and in the article, the attorneys will say, we contacted civil rights, blah, 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 and they said, most likely none of this would hold up in a court of law. But it's still a policy because the Constitution's far away, right? Okay. Here's practical tip. It's called B2. Under section B, 2 means practical tip number 2. Okay? Even my practical tips are organized. You guys, if you're ever in a big, large group at school or work, and you're hearing something and you probably struggle with this, oh, I should stand up in front of 500 people and say something. You know what? You're never going to have enough time to do that. No, you're not going to have enough time to explain. It's just not going to work, and there's a reason why you feel intrepid about doing it. It's intimidating, but it's not going to be effective, right? I have a tip of what you could say that gets a seed planted. If they're talking about something, you could raise your hand and go this. You know, I appreciate that we're having this conversation, but you know what? This policy strikes me as unconstitutional. I don't think it has a chance of holding up in a court of law. And like it or not, the law is the law. Do you see how you get that out there? They don't know your position, but you just tell them, I don't think this is constitutional. Maybe I got my understanding of the law wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is not going to hold up in court. So why are we crafting something like this? Some of you may want it, some of you may not. If it goes in front of a judge, I don't think it's going to last. Isn't that, so you see, that at least gets something out. And what do you bring back in the room that's far, far away? The Constitution. So that's what I do in large groups. In smaller situations, I prefer the one-on-one. So you know when they tried to get me to be sensitive with my speech, I did I called a law firm. I got a hold of a number, and they were going to maybe help me a little bit, but since I hadn't been terminated, I told them, you know what, I'm going to write a letter, but I'd appreciate if you just look at it for legalese or whatever. I handled it in-house. I met with my president. A letter, and boy, that letter was good because it took her a while to respond, right? How am I gonna, that's, okay. So we finally met, and she knew what my concerns were, and because these people that I work around where this happened, they were good people, well-meaning. Even the person was saying, you need to be more sensitive, Dave. I like the person, just kind of clueless. Or just buying into the whole, wherever culture's flowing down the river, they're on board. So I did handle it in-house, and you find the power brokers wherever you are, and meet with the president of your college, meet with your CEO, and real tactfully just bring something to their attention. That is a way to handle it, and I actually prefer it that way. But in large groups, just appeal to the Constitution, and you guys may find that will serve you well, okay? See, I'm giving you so many tips here, it's not even, Okay, how about the last one, First Amendment rights and public accommodation? I'm gonna explain the rationale of the Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, and the second case that was more important, Smith versus Alenis. So these were both public accommodation businesses. Do you guys know what is meant by a public accommodation business? The meaning is almost in the term. What does that mean?
They provide a service of some kind and they are supposed to accommodate all different kinds of people.
Yeah, the public out there, last time I checked, is filled with a bunch of human beings that need things. So they go into your store, I need toothpaste, I need this, you're accommodating the needs of the public, okay? That's what we mean, and you know the famous case, Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, I said that, and the whole issue there was, does that baker have a right to refuse, or must he bake the cake, right? There was a second case that's actually more important. Does anybody know, without looking on the notes, what there was? It had Jack Phillips, that ended in June 2018 when the Supreme Court sided with him for not the direct issue. The second one was Lori Smith versus Elenis. I guess Elenis, that was the top name of the Civil Rights Commission. The actual customer that was denied had a different name. 2023. Hers was, does she have a right to refuse, or must she design a website for a same-sex orientated couple announcing their wedding and doing all their registry and all that? Okay, so same type of thing. Do you have a right to refuse, or must you? Okay, Phillips won, and if you read that opinion, you could tell within it where they would go if it was directly dealt with, because you could see them saying nothing's crashing into First Amendment guardrails. Okay, these are like cherished by everybody. You are not, but does anybody know when I say Phillips won, but they really didn't deal with the issue, why did they give it to Phillips? They didn't deal with the issue of First Amendment, do you have a right to refuse or not in public accommodation?
If I remember correctly, it's because they like offered pre-made cakes as well.
Well, I'm thinking of the legal.
Oh, okay.
No, it was about the commission and how they unfairly treated Jack Phillips in
Yes.
this case. So was it an unfair application of their law, the law?
They sided with Phillips because of procedural biased missteps, and they even used the word animus, okay? And animus, even, this is my theory, I said it before, but when Christian concerns go through a legal process and their rights are debated, and their First Amendment rights to refuse, it's just bad press, or you want this to be seen as unreasonable. Doesn't even make the light of a court case, ideally, okay? The animus goes toward the First Amendment rights don't even apply to this. Strained attempts to say, you're just saying no has a disguised discrimination, okay? Even the whole process attaches a little bit of a reasonableness to conservatives that have their concerns that other people, professionals, are taking seriously and adjudicating, right? Phillips, there was a lot of bias in their they have their statements on record. So the Supreme Court said Phillips was not treated with religious neutrality, viewpoint neutrality. So he won like 7-2 or something like that. The Lori Smith case came next. That's the one where I knew that was going, and that was one smart woman. She did this preemptively.
Right.
She just filed a lawsuit, and for her it worked out. It went right to the Supreme Court, a perfect case. She says, I'm starting my business. I already can see I'm gonna get in trouble here, and this is not constitutional. She filed a lawsuit preemptively before, and it went there, and she won. Now, I'm not trying to brag here. I predicted, I said, of course I think she's gonna win. They finally dealt with, do you have a right to refuse in public accommodation if something's gonna make you feel like you're violating your conscience? And I thought it was gonna be absolute yes, and it was, okay? Now, here's the thing with these cases that I'm gonna leave you with. There's a super important distinction that it's my turn of phrase, and I have seen it in certain articles used the same thing, and the Supreme Court in the opinions might have used different language, these words could have popped up. But remember, I'm a philosophy professor trying to maneuver, and I've thought this through, okay? With public accommodation, you need to think of this: neutral commerce versus non-neutral commerce transactions. Neutral commerce transaction requests, non-neutral commerce transaction requests, okay? Neutral commerce is this: someone walks in, protected class, they want toothpaste, they want a dozen donuts, they would like to buy shampoo. Those transactions, that kind of commerce, if it's public accommodation, you cannot discriminate and say, I'm not having you buy shampoo because you're Asian, right? If it's neutral, and there's no way you could ever convince a court, well, this violated my conscience. Clearly illegal. All of us agree as Christians we would never do that. You can't do that when the commerce is neutral. Okay? Non-neutral commerce is when someone asks you something where this specific request, you're not willing to do it because you feel if you participated in it, it would violate your conscience. So non-neutral. A commerce request where if you participated, you believe and feel you would be violating your conscience and not being allowed to exercise your First Amendment right of conscience. Remember, this is First Amendment. In the court, you start bringing that up, they actually stiffen and do this. Okay? Democrat and Republican in a lot of cases, okay? Just, these are guardrails. So if you keep this distinction in mind, you'll understand both of these rulings, especially the Lori Smith. They didn't feel Smith and Phillips refused neutral commerce transactions, okay? Phillips had served same-sex orientated customers for years, okay? So when they say it was the couple, not the request, it's just ridiculous. He served same-sex orientated individuals all the time, okay? And anything that was neutral, he accommodated, and if he didn't, he deserves to be fined. It's illegal, and he'd be in a lot of trouble. The Supreme Court kept that distinction in mind, okay? They obviously didn't think Phillips or Smith refused neutral public accommodation requests, okay? All right, now with that, we're almost done here. Do you see how that could be very, very helpful? Now, when I get a lot of papers from my students, their last paper, they choose from 5 topics to talk on. One of them is this. A lot of the students that think what Jack Phillips did, it was so awful, it's discriminatory. We have the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, CADA, right? They don't have this distinction in mind from their research. And I even give them a research packet, and I have one of them down there. Make sure you're aware of this. So they assume that anytime you say no, it's always neutral, right? So it's wrong. And I said both these cases, Phillips and Smith, they never refused neutral. And because I gave audio feedback for my essays, I say that would be clearly wrong. This was non-neutral, which the Colorado the Colorado what is that called again? I just can't. Okay, here it is. Okay, Colorado, sorry about that, Anti-Discrimination Act. I was getting that acrostic wrong for a minute. Okay, if you read that, here's what this says in the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. Prohibits discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations based on protected characteristics like race, creed, color, sexual orientation, sex, gender, and all that. Do you notice something that's missing? They don't bring out this distinction. They conflate neutral with non-neutral, and they just mean for whatever reason you can't refuse They don't go into, well, what if it's something that's bouncing into a guardrail? So they make you, so my students go, of course this is wrong, it violates this. Here's how the Supreme Court looks at it. It didn't, Colorado statutes really are about neutral commerce. Don't refuse. If you do, you are discriminating against a class, quite possibly. Don't do it, you're in trouble. We all agree with that. They never make a distinction in there between that and non-neutral. And there are a lot of states that their Anti-Discrimination Act clauses, they have, except for services where creative expression is required, they have those in there. Do you see how that is the non-neutral distinction? Ours conflates it. So you know what I actually want to do if I had the time? I've been thinking about it. I would like to go through the process of where you come up with CADA to amend it in light of the Lori Smith case. Shouldn't we change our wording and have an exception for non-neutral commerce? They haven't done that, but I wonder, I bet you if I need to find the meeting, I've got to find out how to do that, but I bet you I'll get pushback. But the Supreme Court has already ruled the law's the law. How come this hasn't been changed, right?
Well, there was a second case against Jack Phillips.
Yes.
The same attorney tried to do it again, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the second time, so Alliance Defending Freedom worked with Jack, and they argued the case based on compelled speech, which would align with the non-neutral commerce. But you can't force somebody to say something or do a creative expression that would go against their personal convictions, and they won that. So and that would also go with the email signature thing, where they've given you an option. You can do this or you can do that.
Yeah, there was no
compelling your speech. You're saying you must put such and such, on your, in your letter. Or
yes. People are going to feel it's compelled when it's violating their First Amendment rights. If it's not even close to that, they go, okay, that's all right. Okay, you don't want blue on there. Okay. But now that's interesting. I'm going to have to do some research because I thought the transgender cake, eventually the state dropped the case after the Smith verdict. And because of certain rulings, and they had some more recordings apparently, they dropped it, but I'll look into that.
Yeah.
But do you see how this distinction can really help? Okay, so if they appeal to CADA, you see CADA is purposely not mentioning non-neutral commerce. That's what this all was about. And people they misunderstand. They're not saying you can discriminate against people. If it's neutral, you better not. Christian or not, you're in trouble. If it's non-neutral, the Supreme Court kept that in mind. They have the right because we have these guardrails, and so far the court, you're not crashing through this stuff, okay? Because if you do, then we start really leaving a democracy, right? When you have that. And then one more tip. Okay, so practical tip C2 was how to respond that they were, here's one. What about if someone says this? Hey, but you're preferring the rights of Jack Phillips and Lori Smith, who've got rights, over the rights of same-sex orientated individuals. So they have rights, it's equality before the law, but you seem to side with those two. How would you guys respond to that?
I'd question if having someone else make you a cake is a right.
Okay. All right.
Simply legally, I would look at just the hierarchy of laws, and so on the top you have the Constitution, and then way down here you have Colorado state law, and the Constitution always
Trumps.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's say it did. There's still got to be a principle at that federal constitutional level. I'm kind of looking for something else. We're gonna, I have a metaphor, school of fishes, okay? And I made this up just so you know, don't be taking credit for it. Do you guys know how to spell my last name when you would give me credit for it, okay? It's Spiegel. Here's what a pluralistic culture is. You know what a school of fish, we're swimming along, we've all had guppies in the aquarium, right? They're just doing this. We have a bunch of different fishes. And you are not allowed to bump into other fish, right? And push them in a direction they don't want to go. We kind of have to do our thing. Now, if one of the guppies commits murder, you can push them into prison, okay? Respecting their rights, but they can be quarantined and there can be some pushing. But the pushing you can't do is when your pursuit of happiness pushes into someone else's and starts violating their First Amendment rights. So you have freedom to move and maneuver. You just can't bump into other fishes. So when this same-sex orientated couple was in there and Jack had the right to refuse, actually their rights were never ever put in last place or taken away. You know what their rights were? In any public accommodation business, you are allowed to engage in neutral commerce as much as you want. You've always never had the right to bump into a fish and have them feel compelled to violate their First Amendment rights. So all that happened with the same-sex couple, their rights weren't put in last place or second place here. They were just reminded, remember, you've never been allowed to bump into people. So you can still visit the store, buy a bunch of stuff. We're just reminding you what those rights were all the time. Is neutral commerce, you can't force non-neutral commerce. Now, if Jack Phillips was the only bakery in town for 50 miles, what do you think should happen there? I'm throwing you a little wrench. And you have a public, you have LGBTQ, you've got religious people in the public that needs to be accommodated. What about that?
I think that his conscience, we cannot require him to violate his conscience. It's just not okay, no matter what the circumstances are. But that reason right there is why that case has always irritated me. Go down the street to somebody, some other baker.
Yes, and that's why they said, your rights, you want to bump into someone here, you are going to have to kind of walk across the street. But the thing is, if he was the only bakery in a long thing, they may have to say, look, there's a compelling government interest here. And you're going to have to serve, or this is not the business for you in this area. I think that's what would happen, because you're not a public, you can't accommodate the public and they need wedding cakes. That's my sense.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm saying there's no bakery around anywhere. Go ahead.
I don't think that adding circumstances onto something would necessarily be a good idea, because you can just constantly get those boundaries pushed back. into
Okay,
things
what
like-
circumstances are you talking about? Like there's no other businesses around?
Yes.
Where does it end?
Yeah, and I'm throwing this out, I'll say this. My sense is there may be a compelling government interest that, sometimes you can push back on certain restrictions in the least minimal way. RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, if there is a compelling government interest, the restrictions have to be as, how do you say this, only as much as is needed. So I'm going to say this, I'm not even going to disagree with you. It's something I thought of, I'm using some intuitions, and maybe I should chat GPT that. My sense is there may be some restriction, as minimal as possible, but I'm not saying you could not be right there. I'm kind of speculating. What do you guys think? I think it's kind of a tricky one there. But you're right, here we're doing this, you're going to erode, I get that. It's not this case, so this is kind of academic, okay? Yeah.
I've also always thought that if I were part of that same-sex couple, it wouldn't have been that hard. I've always had the sense that they rubbed his nose in the fact that they were same-sex couple. And all they had to do is walk in and say, or just like one of them, walk in and say,
Wedding cake.
could I get a wedding cake, please? And just describe what you want it to
Yes.
look like, and
But do you see what they're saying? We shouldn't have to do that. We have rights and do this, but they're just not aware of these distinctions. I could see why they wouldn't want to do that. Now, fortunately, in the courts, they sided with the religious vendors here, okay? And you remember with this animus, just because if you've had bad experiences with Christians, you've got anger, okay? I have a student right now, and I believe I'm correctly seeing what his background is, and I could see there's just been some bad experiences and it's translating. They're gonna probably feel that we should not have to go in and say just that. So the neutral, non-neutral really, really helps, is that your rights weren't overridden, you were just reminded your rights never were allowed to bump into other fish in the guppy school. Okay, at least that's how I think is not a bad way of approaching that. And then there's just one more. What about this? And we're done. Well, this is the same kind of discrimination that happened in the past when you refused to serve Asians or African Americans in a restaurant, and that was shot down, and and that was unlawful discrimination. This is the same thing. How would you respond to that? It's illegal, you can't do race-based discrimination in a restaurant. Could you use the neutral, non-neutral distinction there? Okay, let's use that.
Yeah, so in the neutral distinction, the identity of the customer has no effect on the person performing the business.
In effect on their what?
Conscience?
Yes. And that's one way. They've stopped that through interstate commerce. There's been different cases to rule that out. That's interesting. But you could just say this, look, the courts have never been persuaded that if you serving, I just cannot serve Asians chocolate glazed donuts. It violates my conscience. How's that gonna work in court? You know what a judge is gonna do? Really? Really? So this is neutral commerce that you are rejecting. It's unlawful. What kind of religion do you have that's violating your conscience? It doesn't pass that reasonable. That is one way to approach it. They've done it some other ways, but that is unlawful. And you say here, it's not the same. Phillips and Smith was non-neutral. That seems to be clearly, your conscience isn't being violated. Your convictions of white supremacy is being violated. Yeah.
I do struggle with that a lot though. So in that example, right, if someone argues that they cannot provide a chocolate glazed donut to a person of a specific race, which is a protected identity, because it goes against their religion, like what is the argument that the judge is making other than just, well, that's stupid, right? Because I say that because 10, 15, 50 years down the line, let's say 90% of Protestant Americans interpret the Bible as believing in same-sex marriage. Then the judge would look at that and be like, well, you're just interpreting the Bible an incorrect way. Do you see what I'm saying with that?
Yes, and critics, when these rulings came down, they were concerned, is this gonna open up a can of worms that everything's expressive and gives people excuse to say discriminate? I would say this, these judges are getting paid lots of money and hopefully they're in their positions because they've impressed people with their legal reasoning and conclusions on complicated stuff. And that'll be the job of the courts to make sure that doesn't get wackadoodle, and they're gonna bring in natural law. I mean, we've had people interpret the Bible in a lot of ways, but racism, sexism, these things seem to have prevailed and have been upheld in the Bible, and you have these outliers. So
Could you explain that last sentence again? I didn't quite follow.
If someone's, if I guess people have not been, you cannot discriminate against people because of skin color. That has just resonated that is a self-evident natural law truism, and anybody who is using that. So I would say this, that's for the judges and the courts, and right now it seems like it's not an issue right now, and I don't know if it ever will be. Didn't you have that one Indian tribe, they were smoking,
Peyote.
peyote, they allowed that person to do that, I think the judges work that stuff out. I just think the force of self-evident truisms comes into that. I just don't think they're gonna remove these protected classes, that now it's okay to discriminate because suddenly 100 years later, we're all thinking differently because of culture.
Sure, but what about?
And I don't know if I'm answering.
No, I appreciate that answer, and I agree, but what about the other way? What if they just start adding to the protected classes? That's more what I was getting at, right? So they start adding, like another one that comes to my mind is conservative Christian denominations don't allow women pastors. That is discrimination against a protected class, and that's even more in line with something that we've already just said, which is like sexism is wrong. So that's kind of what I'm worried about and thinking through,
It'll go through the courts if it got there, and then if you really felt this was going against doctrinal issues that you're not gonna break on, then there's civil disobedience. But this thing here, that there was kind of what you were saying going on here, and the Supreme Court said no.
Yeah.
There kind of was a push for expansion, right?
Right.
That this is not non-neutral.
Mhm.
These are beliefs that we're judging that are unreasonable, shouldn't be under here, and so far the Supreme Court pushed back. So maybe there's some promise there, yeah. Okay, look, you guys, I'm not on the Supreme Court, you guys do realize that. I'm not one of the, how many justices? 9? I didn't take some time off and come here, okay? I'm just saying, this is how I thought as an apologist and a philosopher, this is just conclusions that I see confirmed, and that's why philosophy is awesome. It teaches us to think, and so far, I think we can be on the right track with this. So hopefully you thought this was helpful. Gives you your bearings. If you're at the table, you can feel a little bit informed about stuff. Okay?
I was wondering about this Asian being non-choice. I was born that way.
Yes.
But then in this sexual preference, it's a preference.
Yes, you can go down that road, but then you get into that controversy. Is it a choice or is it not? And this way it just avoids it. You just say, look, this is neutral. What's your religion where you feel conflicted? God won't let you give a donut. And I know we visited that, but I like going down that road and avoid that whole issue. Just don't even go there, I think is a better strategy. So.
Thank you, David. Well, if anyone has any more questions, of course, you can stay after and talk a zero. Just a quick reminder, so Thursday, we do have that clamming night. I realized after the fact that I misannounced it, but this time it is actually this week. So hopefully I'll see some of you there. I hope I'll be there myself, we'll see. Hopefully I'll make it. Definitely, be praying as well, just for, is it Hansberger, actually? That we pray for, or?
For next week.
No, for who's
Yes, Bill needs prayer.
Yeah, Bill.
Oh, yeah, he needs prayer.
Yeah,
You're
well,
asking who what?
Bill, Hansberger, one of our speakers, is not doing too well. So definitely be praying for him, and his wife as well, and just pray for healing and restoration. Our next speaker, who's our next speaker?
David Wind, or
Dr. Wind.
Dr.
John Wind.
John Wynn.
at TCU. He teaches evangelism there, and he's gonna be here to talk about that and how we can the joys, basically the joys of evangelism.
Yes.
Encourage us to get out there, whiteboard, you know, to give a scholarly approach to this. I think it'll be good.
Yes, the many joys indeed.
Because we're always talking about apologetics.
Yes.
He's gonna talk.
Yeah, we are a club with evangelism and apologetics. It's not just one or the other.
And Dr. Wind also teaches a course in apologetics as well.
That's easy.
So he does
Cool.
both evangelism and apologetics. So he's really aligned with us. And he's a very energetic, fun speaker. So you will enjoy him.
Very good. Awesome. And then one final word, and this is probably only gonna come up like once or twice, so probably tell you again, but we are looking for people that would be willing to serve on leadership. Of course, you know, that commitment is something that's personal, so definitely pray about that. If you know anyone that would really be interested in apologetics or evangelism, we would love to get them on in and get to know them a little bit and hopefully discern and get to know them and if they would be a good fit, because of course it's a give and take thing, but yeah, definitely be praying about that and for us too to raise up more leaders this semester. So I will pray us out.
So on that, we basically have the officers, but then there's leaders too. So you're not necessarily an officer, those are elected, but then there's the leadership team that includes non-officers. Just a little point.
Yes. Good distinction. So officers, it's a hard commitment. So you'd be speaking or you would be doing secretary, finance, whatever. But if you're a leader, you don't necessarily have to have a hard commitment. You're just on the leadership team and you get to be a part of the conversation, give input, give us good insight into what we can do to grow and
planning.
Yeah, and plan and all that, and hopefully make this club just more glorious to the Lord. So definitely think about that one. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this wonderful talk, for putting on our hearts, Lord, to consider the Constitution and be reminded of our rights as Americans, because we do have those rights, Lord. There's a reason why we all have that citizenship. And Lord, I just thank you for that. I thank you for the protections that this nation gives us. One nation under God, I believe that wholeheartedly. And so thank you for David. Thank you for his words. Thank you for his discernment and his experiences, because it's a tricky topic, and drawing those distinctions, Lord, is something that takes effort. It takes asking questions. It takes discerning ourselves, but then trying to discern where others are coming from, and that's a hard thing to do, Lord. And we definitely are grateful that you give us that ability. So all glory be to you, Lord. And I just pray for everyone that will get through midterms okay, and that your will be done in that. And I pray for safe travels and for just good health, and just uplift everyone in this room and be with them as they go forth this week, and definitely be with Bill, Lord, and if it is his time, may it be your will and may it be peaceful. So all these good things, Lord, and I'm running out of words to say, so I'm just gonna say, in your name, may your will be done for our good and your glory. Amen.
Are you all on spring break right now? Oh, I am.
That's early, dang.
That is early.
Yeah, it was early this year, I don't know why.
We're not for a couple weeks.
The latest it can possibly be.
This is great, all I'm doing is smoking pot. all week.
Sorry, I didn't record that. You said it.
Stronger today than it was.
Well, you're right.
Interesting philosophy.
Jason.
It's just always around.
It violates your conscience?
Enjoyed the talk.
Yeah. I'm saying it tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I was.
It should.
I just wanted to.
What if someone with a more
extreme?
Yeah, thanks for coming.
What if someone with like a more extreme ideology, Sharia law, and
Sometimes.
a woman comes in and wants to buy something, maybe they just
Especially in comments.
and evaluate their knowledge, that she's not.
I graduated,
Yeah,
so
like,
It's neutral commerce, and
you know, you kind of have some of these gen eds.
they're not asking for anything offensive, but it's not neutral.
My gen eds are so.
So it's it's very hard.
I don't like humanities. I'm either taking them colleges or I didn't.
And yeah, the key is then you've gotta think about law and
Looking like.
maybe not.
I'll take it,
So you're gonna have to carefully think about what's the difference between
for sure.
that you may think is law